God bless you, dear ones. Welcome to the Word with Chester. Today we will begin study in chapter 8. Also, we may get all the way through chapter 9 today, so quite possibly we'll go through two chapters today. I do thank God for you. I am glad that you're here. I want you to know what a blessing it is. Those of you that watch us, you can follow us, and our lesson, every time we upload a lesson, it will come to your page or let you know that we are there. Also, those of you that watch us by YouTube, if you click the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel, also hit the little bell at the top of your screen, and it will be a blessing to us if you do that. Every time we put up a video, add a new video, you will be made aware of it, and you'll be able to watch it anytime that you get ready. I want you to know how much I appreciate you, and you are in my prayers every day of my life. I mention to God all of those who watch this ministry. I ask God to bless you in all ways. I ask Him to keep you healthy and keep you whole, and let you live an overcoming life. Well, today I'm going to go immediately into our study, and quite possibly if I start now, we can go all the way through chapter 9. So would you turn your Bibles with me, if at all possible, to chapter 8, verse 1 of the book of 2 Samuel. We will begin our reading today. The Bible reads, "And after this it came to pass that David smote the Philistines and subdued them. And David took Methegama out of the hands of the Philistine. And he smote Moab and measured them with a line, casting them down to the ground. Even with two lines measured he to put to death. And with one full line he kept alive. And so and so the Moabites became David's servants and brought gifts." I want you to get the picture now. In this particular chapter, we're actually reading about the extension of David's kingdom. He's adding actually land and adding wealth to the kingdom under his administration as king. And David was king for 40 years, so a lot had transpired. And so here we're reading of the extension of David's kingdom. And he took, as we read, he took the Philistines, and he subdued the lands around there, and also the Moabs. He killed many of them, a measured line. So he took whatever the length that line was, it was that many people that he killed. And then also whatever the measure of the line was, that many people that he spared, and those became his servants. Shall I read in verse 3? Follow along with us now. In verse 3, David smote also Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, the king of Zobah, and he went and recovered his border at the river Euphrates. So David went and recovered. In other words, there was a battle at another time where that land was taken from them. So David reclaimed it. He went in and fought and got the same land that was taken back there at the borders. He recovered his border at the river Euphrates. And I don't know if you're familiar with the great river Euphrates. Well, that was one of the great rivers that was mentioned many times in the Bible. And as we study, we're going to talk about that river at a later time and its significance, because a lot of things went on from the river Euphrates, and also commerce going up and down the river Euphrates, because it was a river long enough that would put them out into the sea area, to where merchants can bring things in and take things out, and things of that nature. So David reclaimed that area along the river Euphrates. In verse 4, and David took from him 1,000 chariots and 700 horsemen and 20,000 footmen. And David hamstrung all the chariot horses, but reserved of them for 100 chariots. So get the picture. David took that many men and took that many chariots, and he hamstrung all the horses. Number one, if you have that many horses around, if the enemy break free and get him a horse, he can do a lot of things. So David hamstrung or killed I'll read 4 again. And David took from him 1,000 chariots and 700 horsemen and 20,000 footmen. And David hamstrung all the chariot horses. He hamstrung them and reserved of them for 100 chariots. He kept for them for 100 chariots. That many horses, he did not hamstring all of them. In verse 5, and when the Syrians of Damascus came to aid Hadadezer, king of Zoab, David slew of the Syrians 22,000 men. He killed that many men now because they had came out to help Hadadezer. Evidently, they were allies with him, and they came out to fight with him, and that many of their men were slain. 22,000. That's a lot of men. 22,000. Now let's read in verse 6. And David put garrisons in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became servants to David and brought gifts, and the Lord preserved David wherever he went. Now let's talk about that a little bit. And David put garrisons. I know that's not a word that we use all the time, garrisons, but let me let you know, David put forts and men in watch positions all around these areas. So he set up garrisons there. He set up watch and men to patrol along those areas. I'll read 6 again. And David put in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became servants to David and brought gifts, and the Lord preserved David wherever he went. Now let's continue reading in 7. And David took the shields of gold that were on the servants of Hadadezer, and brought them to Jerusalem. He took the gold, the shields of gold that were on the servants of Hadadezer. You get the picture? The shields of gold. They were all arrayed with gold and all of those type of things, and David took them and took the gold back to Jerusalem. In verse 8, and from Betah and from Berothia, cities of Hadadezer, King David took very much bronze. He took the gold that was on their shield, and he took a lot of bronze, took very much bronze. When Toi, king of Hamath, heard that David had smitten all the host of Hadadezer, then Toi sent Joram, his son, unto King David to greet him and to bless him, because he had fought against Hadadezer and smitten him. For Hadadezer had war with Toi, and Joram brought with him vessels of silver and vessels of gold and vessels of bronze. Can you see the wealth of David growing, the spoils that he had taken? This is gold and silver now. This is just not just any kind of metal. This is precious metal that David took that could be used for so many things. I won't go into specifics of what soft gold would do, a soft metal, and then hard metals and what they would do and the specificness of it. But can you see how the wealth of of David had grown, or is growing at this time. In verse 11, which also King David did dedicate unto the Lord with the silver and gold that he had dedicated of all nations, which he subdued. Everything that he got, he brought it back and he dedicated it unto the Lord. Verse 12, of Syria and of Moab and of the children of Ammon and of the Philistines and of Amalek and of the spoils of Hadadezer, son of Roab, king of Zobah. So David dedicated everything, all the spoils that he got from these, he dedicated them to the Lord. In verse 13, and David got him a name when he returned from smiting of the Syrians in the valley of Salt, being 18,000 men. He got him a name. Get the picture. He got him a name there. Now you can run a cross reference there if you would like to in 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 9. But he got him a name. He got him a name when he returned from smiting of the Syrians in the valley of Salt, being 18,000 men. Now let's read in verse 14. And he put garrisons, again, remember what garrison was. He stationed troops and things around. And he put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom put he garrisons. And all they of Edom became David's servants. And the Lord preserved David wherever he went. Second time we have that verse in this chapter. The Lord preserved David wherever he went. Can you see the hand of the Lord was with David and on David? And one thing about it, David would always recognize that this is the Lord that's fighting our battles. This is the Lord that is subduing our enemies for us. In verse 15, and David reigned over all Israel, not just part of Israel, but he reigned over all Israel. And David executed justice and righteousness unto all his people. Now that's saying a lot right there about King David. He executed justice and righteousness unto all his people. He didn't play favorites and he didn't try to take all the wealth into himself, but he executed justice. He was just to the people that served under him, and that meant the whole kingdom. And he executed righteousness. He did them right. And that's all any person could ask. Just do me right. That's all I ask people to do, is just do me right. And so David did the people right. And he was just and honest with them in all manners. Can you see this? Now let's read in verse 16. And Joab, the son of Jeruiah, was over the host, and Jehoshaphat, the son of Eliud, was recorder. I want you to get the picture. We're talking about King David here, but you have to get the picture. He had his cabinet like a president would have, or any king would have, the men around him that would keep his records and would do the things that he would tell them to do to make the kingdom better. And I'll read in 16 again. And Joab, the son of Jeruiah, was over the host. He was over the host now. And Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, was recorder. He kept the records. I want you to get this now. Verse 17, and Zadok, the son of Ahitub, and Abimelech, the son of Abiathar, were the priests. And Sariah was the scribe. Saraiah was the scribe. Now, all of these men had a function. I think I talked about the scribes, but that was when I was teaching in the New Testament scriptures. But if you remember, the scribes, he was supposed to know the law. So this was one of the ones that were around David or in his cabinet. So he's mentioning his cabinet here now in verse 18. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over both the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and David's son was chief rulers. So all of these was the cabinet around David. We call it a cabinet, but the other important men in the kingdom that David had work around him. And I don't care how big you get, you need some people working around you that can give you good advice and give you and speak truth. And so David had these men working around him in the kingdom. Now we're going to go immediately into chapter 9. Very, very wonderful chapter. So stay with us as we go into chapter 9 now. David and Mephibosheth. Now I told you in a prior lesson to remember that name, Mephibosheth. Now his name is coming up, and we're going to find as we read who he is in verse 1 of chapter 9. The Bible reads, and David said, "Is there yet any who is left of the house of Saul, that I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" For Jonathan's sake. Now this was not for Saul's sake, but for Jonathan's sake. And if you remember reading, it's important as you study, take note of things, especially when a covenant is made. And David and Jonathan had made a covenant that if David would become king, that he would be kind to him and his offspring. So if you remember the covenant that Jonathan and David had made, David is just bringing that covenant to pass right now. I'll read it again in verse 1. And David said, "Is there yet any who is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" And this is also a very good picture of what grace is. What grace is. And I thank God for grace because it spared me and spared many other people because grace is so important. And David is actually showing grace to the house of Saul and also his good friend Jonathan. In verse 2, and there was of the house of Saul a servant whose name was Ziba. And when they had called him unto David, the king said unto him, "Art thou Ziba?" ? And he said, "Thy servant is here," showing respect to the king. Do respect to the king. And the king said, "Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him?" ? And Ziba said unto the king, "Jonathan hath yet a son who is lame on his feet." Now remember what I talked about this man Mephibosheth, how he got lame when King Saul was killed and his sons were killed. Then they grabbed Mephibosheth. He was just a little small boy at the time, and they grabbed him. His nurse grabbed him, and on the way out, she dropped him and broke his feet. So this is why he was lame at this time. Now let's read in verse 4. And the king said unto him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said unto the king, "Behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lodebar." That's where he is. He is in Lodebar with this person here. Shall I read one more time for you? And the king said unto him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said unto him, "Behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lodebar." Verse 5, then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lodebar. He sent down to get Mephibosheth. In verse 6, and when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was come unto David, he fell on his face and did obeisances. And David said to Mephibosheth, and he answered, Behold, thy servant. And David said, Mephibosheth. I called his name. And he answered, Behold, thy servant. Can you get the picture now? I would imagine Mephibosheth probably didn't know why he was going up before the king. Why is he coming to get me? And we're going to read further and get some more intelligence out of that. But can you imagine how Mephibosheth probably felt? Somebody came to get him where he was and brought him up to the king. You got to understand, you know your family history, and you know that things were not going so well between Saul and David, so he could have thought that he brought him up there to kill him. But yet we're going to read on in verse 7. And David said unto him, Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake. This is who I'm doing it for. I'm doing it for Jonathan, your father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father. Excuse me. And thou shalt eat at my table continually. Can you see what he's doing to Mephibosheth, or for Mephibosheth? Can you see what he's doing in verse 8? And he bowed down and said, What is thy servant that thou shouldest look upon such a dead dog as I am? Can you see what Mephibosheth is saying here? What am I? Who am I that you would look upon such a dead dog as me? That's pretty rough when you call your own self a dead dog. Now he knew that he was lame in his feet and he couldn't do anything. So he was wondering, who am I that you would bring me before you and your royalty? Can you get what Mephibosheth is saying? As we read on in verse 9, then the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said unto him, I have given unto thy master's son all that pertain to Saul and to all his house. Verse 10, Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shall till the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruit, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Can you see? A whole lot of people is getting blessed here now because of Mephibosheth, because David was showing kindness. Can you get the picture? When God blesses one, he also blesses other people around them. If they have the right spirit and they're willing to submit to what is going on. So he's letting them know everything that was Saul's, I'm restoring to Mephibosheth. And I want you to set up this land. You go out and till this land, and whatever you grow out of it, it should be there for Mephibosheth and his sons to eat. But Mephibosheth himself is going to eat at my table. I read Ziba himself had 15 sons and 20 servants. Can you imagine how many of them there that were going to reap, because he gave him all the land that belonged to King Saul? Can you get that picture now? In verse 11, then said Ziba unto the king, According to all that my lord the king hath commanded his servants, so shall thy servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. He's going to be as one of my sons. And let me let you know who Mephibosheth was, if you please. Yes, he was the son of Jonathan. He was the son of Jonathan, David's great friend. But yet you have to also understand that David was married to Michal, which was Saul's daughter. And so that would make him by marriage the uncle of Mephibosheth, if you please. And David was treating him like he was one of his own sons and let him eat at his table. I hope you're getting this picture here now. In verse 12, and Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. So Please excuse me, my friends. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants of Mephibosheth. All of these were Mephibosheth's servants. Even though he was lame in his feet and couldn't do a lot of things himself, he had servants to do it for him. As we read in verse 13, so Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat regularly at the king's table, and he was lame on both feet. He ate regularly at the king's table. Well, that lets you know that God can pick you up and show you kindness. Number one, for his father's sake. He can show you kindness and show you grace, and I also want you to get the spirit of David. A lot of the other kings that we read about, when the preceding king had died, or they had killed him, they would go and kill all of his family, everyone, anybody who could be an heir, a possible heir, they would kill them. But you got to get the picture of the kindness that David showed, not because of Saul, but because he was Jonathan's friend, because he was a loyal and a great friend to Jonathan, and also this was actually his nephew by marriage. Can you get the picture that God was showing mercy and also showing you and I a type of grace, a type of grace where God will be kind to you even when you think you don't deserve it. God will be kind to you even when you think you're not where you ought to be, or you're the least of the least. God can and will be kind to you. And in this particular case, King David was kind to Mephibosheth. Not because he had this great relationship with Mephibosheth, but he had a great relationship with Mephibosheth's father. He had a great relationship with Jonathan. And so we got to get the entire picture and see the grace of God in this, and also the grace that lived in David's heart, the kindness that lived in David's heart, and also wanting to keep his word in covenant because he had made a covenant with Jonathan, and also he was just a kind person because he did right to all of the children of Israel. He walked in righteousness and treated them righteously and justly. Remember reading all of these things David did, for he was just that kind of man. And I want you to see the greatness of King David. Now, this story of David, we have farther to go. We're going to read more about King David. Now, you got to get the picture. 40 years is a long span, and so we in this particular book we're going to read the entire kingship of David. So I encourage you to stay with us and watch and see the hand of God on David, and you will get intelligence of how we ought to be. We ought to be persons of integrity. We ought to treat people right and treat them justly. And when we get that spirit, and when we do that, God will also bless us. Why? Because we're trying to doing all we can to do the right thing by people. And when you do the right thing by people, God will do a right thing by you. Well, I want you to know I love you, my dears. I love you with the love of the Lord. God bless you.